to the Community Preservation
That's the real
Commission meeting. Wednesday, January 15th, 5:30 p.m. We're in the Norwood Senior Center. I will go ahead and take roll call because we have a remote member. So I'll start off with Deb Homewood.
Here.
Julie Barba Isa.
Here.
Joe Greeley.
Here.
John Hall.
Here.
Amanda Grow.
Here.
Cheryl Doyle.
Here.
Patty Griffith-Starr.
Here.
John Hall.
One more
Oh, did
time,
I
I'm
get you?
here.
Oh, good, great. I have you twice. Joe Sheehan.
Here.
Good. And the chair, Catherine Walsh. Yes, here. Hopefully I got
Doing
everybody.
business as in.
Okay. And so first on our agenda are the meeting minutes from September 23rd, the 9th, and the 24th. Should we probably take them separately because there were some absent members and they might want to abstain to certain ones. So we'll take the first set of meeting minutes from September 23rd, 2024.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Okay, we'll go around. Debbie Homewood,
Yes.
Julie Barba Isa,
Yes.
Joe Greeley,
Aye.
John Hall,
Yes.
Amanda Grow,
Yes.
Cheryl Doyle,
Yes.
Patty Griffith-Starr.
Yes.
Joe Sheehan,
Yes.
and Catherine Walsh, yes. Thank you. And we have, next we have the meeting minutes from October 9, 2024. Any questions? Comments?
No.
Motion?
Motion.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Second.
Thanks, Joe. All right, we'll go around. Deb Homewood,
Yes.
Julie Barba Isa,
Abstain?
Joe Greeley,
Yes.
John Hall,
Yes.
Amanda Grow,
Yes.
Cheryl Doyle,
Yes.
Patty Griffith-Starr.
I'll abstain, I was absent.
Great, thank you. Joe Sheehan
Yes.
and Catherine Walsh, yes. And the third set of meeting minutes from October 23rd, 2024. Comments?
Motion to approve?
Thanks, Julie. Second?
Second.
Great, thanks, Carol. Go around. Deb Homewood,
Yes.
Julie Barba Isa.
Yes.
Joe Greeley.
Yes.
John Hall.
Yes.
Amanda Grow.
Yes.
Cheryl Doyle.
Yes.
Patty Griffith-Starr.
Yes.
Joe Sheehan.
Yes.
And Catherine Walsh, yes. All right, thank you. So we're going to move on to the second and most substantive part of our agenda tonight. And so we will have 4 presentations for submitted applications for the 2026 CPA funding. And so I just want to remind everybody, so we'll have the presentations, and then we'll go to the committee members for questions, and then we'll go to people in the audience that are here, and then we will move to any questions or comments on the phone. So just a reminder, this is an opportunity for you guys to ask any questions, clarification, wanting additional information. So now is the moment. I'll just ask that we try and keep it relatively brief and not ask repeated questions. Certainly, I don't want to stifle any questions that you guys need, but I want to make sure, I don't know how many people we have online, but I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to provide comments. So, so with that, we'll start off with the first CPA application, and it's the Conservation Fund transfer, and the applicant is the Conservation, and I think Carly Rockland is here to walk us through that. Thanks, Carly.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Carly Rockland, Conservation Planner of the Town of Norwood. I'm the liaison with the Conservation Commission. And this is an application to put $10,000 into the Conservation Land Fund that we use to help us acquire land, to help us do due diligence when we're interested in acquiring land as well. The fund helps us to acquire land outside of the town meeting cycle, which is helpful for some landowners. Let's see. Yes, so some of the activities that funding might cover are land surveys, assessments, and so forth. Let's see. So we might use the land fund for land purchase, maintenance of, or capital improvements to land, monitoring conservation restrictions. For instance, we have a conservation restriction on the Cooper Park land. Expenses related to land purchases like title searches, legal expenses of deed preparation and title passing, investigation of land before use, geographic information systems expenses like preparing open space plans and maps or recording votes on land transfers. We're currently using up to $5,000 to prepare 55 St. Paul Street for donation to the town, for instance. The dedicated account currently has $124,079, as well as $20,000 sitting in the CPC project account for the Conservation Land Fund. Town meeting generally adds $10,000 per year. And we already went over the last point that having the fund adds flexibility to the Conservation Commission and town for acquiring land. Conservation commissions are responsible for protecting land, water, and biological resources in our community. We enforce the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Norwoods Wetlands Protection Bylaw and regulations. We also manage and acquire conservation lands. Of course, conservation lands provide public benefits. On this page, there are a few. You can see one person who is fly fishing on Trapole Brook, which our town recently restored. We took a dam down, restored the upper stream corridor, and it's great trout habitat. So passive recreation, conservation of town character. Our town has much developed area, also some open space, woods, fields, streams, ponds, river, wildlife habitat, ambient temperature reduction, access to waterfront, strength of climate resiliency, flood control, pollution mitigation, air quality maintenance. Those are a few of the benefits that our community gets from open space in town. Acquiring open space helps our town to meet the open space and recreation plan goals. We protect and preserve our natural resources. We develop more recreational opportunities for our community. We increase public awareness of open space, incorporate environmental justice and equity, and create organizational and funding support for implementing the plan. By acquiring open space, we also meet our community's sustainability action plan goals. For instance, in regards to public health, we create physical environments that promote good health, increasing access, for instance, to paths, waterways, and we protect the town's surface and groundwater resources. Land that's of interest to the Conservation Commission in terms of acquisition might include lands near conservation or town-owned land, connecting parcels for trails and recreation, land in environmental justice areas or areas lacking open space access, and land near our waterways and ponds. This is a project I mentioned before. This is a small sliver of land within the bounds of Cooper Park. It was owned by, or it is owned by the Neponset River Landholding Association. They are in the midst of donating it to the town, and the Conservation Commission allotted up to $5,000 to cover expenses associated with that transfer. These are previous CPC projects that we are awarded funds for. In Aladizo's Park, the pavilion, which you may recognize, the Cooper Park, and land conservation fund transfers. Are there any questions that I can answer or comments?
Great, thanks Carly. We'll start with the committee members. John?
At the last town meeting, there was a bit of last minute to do when it was revealed that the budget being proposed by the town did not include its own $10,000. And we have been fairly scrupulous about trying to make sure that our funds are not used to replace funds from the town. So the town put them back in. I would be more comfortable with this proposal if it said, instead of $10,000, it said, we will match what's put in the town budget up to a maximum of $10,000.
You will have to make a recommendation to town meeting, and it's typically a definitive.
Yep.
I don't know that you can make a conditional recommendation. It's a possible. I mean,
Carly, do you know if the town is proposing $10,000 in their budget this May? Do you have any idea?
Do not at this time.
Okay.
I can look
It
into
might be a little early still.
Yeah, that's what I was just
Okay.
gonna
Any other
say.
questions?
Pull it up.
Good. Joe?
Just relative to that, I do wonder if it's going to be problematic just from a sequence of events at town meeting. Like, if we made our motion to that, using that verbiage, we would either have to go after the operating budget is passed, or like we would have to defer the vote on this specific motion until we basically see what town meeting approves from an operating budget standpoint. So it's our vote then is contingent on what town meeting votes. So just sequentially, and this isn't a problem, it might be just a logistics issue, that we wouldn't be able to vote on our project proposals until after the operating budget is approved. It's not a problem, it's just a timing issue.
John, go ahead, and then we'll go to you, Cheryl, next.
All good points about the timing sequence. I believe that we do tend to come up after the operating budget, at least this part of it is acted on, so I'm not sure that would be a problem. We could make an award for $10,000 and put a footnote in that says, this is conditional on this amount of, this will be withdrawn or reduced if $10,000 or more is not included in the budget from the town.
Cheryl?
Since we started doing the meetings with FinCom, would it be easier for us when we go to FinCom to ask for that 10 to stay in the budget so we can match it with our 10, and then we'd know ahead of town meeting? And then they would know that we're looking at the 10 again, instead of going surprise on the floor?
I mean, I think we could see if it's in the budget, and if it's not, we could get with
Because they would
FinCom
let
and
us.
present,
I'm
yeah.
sure they'd let us know, because by the time we start talking to them, they're going to know what their budget is.
Yep, okay.
Right.
All right, that seems, go ahead,
Like
Joe.
to that point, last year, we didn't know that the 10,000 had been pulled out of the operating budget until the books were published. So we're already 6 weeks or more
Okay.
beyond when somebody
Yeah.
made a decision to eliminate that from the operating budget.
Yeah, well, certainly there's a plan to go to FinCom earlier than we went last
Yes,
year, so
yeah.
yeah, we can tackle that then. Are you okay with that, John?
I think it's quite possible that there would be a last-minute change because they run into problems balancing the budget, and the people who are deciding what to cut out really don't have an awareness or a history of the relationship between our actions and their actions. I think Cheryl makes a good point, and Joe makes a good point, that there'll be several opportunities before we get to the town meeting to know what the plan appears to be. And if there is a last-minute pull, we can convene this committee when we've got the books to look at and change our vote. And we can emphasize to FinCom that this is meant to be a matching award.
Right.
Okay, fair enough. Deb, any questions?
Yeah, we did get the 10,000 that Cheryl and Joe caught last year, right? We did get that?
Yes.
Yes.
And if the town wasn't willing to, or didn't have the money to put the 10,000 in, would we still give conservation the 10,000 from CPC?
Joe?
I think what we're
Trying to get another 10,000.
the sooner we have these discussions with the FinCom and the town manager's office about the operating budget, $10,000, the sooner we start those conversations, the less likely we're gonna encounter a surprise at the last minute. And the, you know, really what we're trying to accomplish is a match, it's not one or the other. And, you know, the bottom line is we're trying to increase the bottom line. That was an accident. But, you know, we want to get more into this fund because $10,000 just isn't going to allow us to buy a piece of property unless we pick up the pace a little bit. So I think there's we just need to reinforce the underlying cause for what we're trying to accomplish.
So how do we move it forward?
Well, I think we have a
Move
little
it
time
forward.
because we're not voting on them today.
Right,
So
okay.
we can do some recon and maybe get some sort of answer or commitment before we actually vote on that. So,
Okay.
So Joe, one more time.
Sorry.
No worries.
Unrelated to that, but Carly, just as an example, you mentioned that $5,000, up to $5,000 for the St. Paul Ave property. And I'm just thinking mechanically, we've got 124,000 roughly in the non-CPA fund, part of the fund. And we've got 20,000 so far in the CPA sourced fund. So mechanically, again, we need to make sure that we're keeping track of anything that's spent out of the CPC portion of this. So mechanically, if we had to spend that $5,000 today, do we have a mechanism in place that's going to allow us to track where that 5,000 came from?
I believe so. Generally, we put funds numbers into our payments, like pulling funds to pay for things. So I believe so.
So Joe, just the operating funds, they don't roll over, right? You lose them at the end of the fiscal year, right?
Generally, operating funds do.
So we think we would
But-
want to tag it to an operating fund,
but
right?
not-
But this is a, I hate to go all accounting, but this is a balance sheet reserve.
Yeah,
Which
okay.
means it doesn't roll over. It stays, it just carries forward year to year.
So it does roll over.
It does roll over.
I'm sorry,
Does,
by
yeah.
rolling over.
Okay, got it,
It
got
doesn't
it.
revert back to
So the operating money
back to the
rolls
source.
forward and then the CPC is also obviously
Yeah.
rolls forward?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
So, but what we need to do is from our standpoint, we need to make sure we have some reporting mechanism whereby if say we were all tapped out of the money that originally came from town meeting and the operating fund, and now we're dipping into the money that came from CPA
Yeah,
funds.
got it.
We would need to be able to keep track of that.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that I know we talked about that last year. I just want to make sure that some process is in place.
All right, we'll bring that back to Concom, but obviously we'll want to spend the town money first, right?
Wearing these hats, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you for that
Thank you.
point. All right, thanks, Carly. And don't sit down. Oh, no, wait a minute. Do we have any questions from the audience here? None? Okay. Anybody online? All right. Okay, so we'll move on to the next project, which is the Guile Pond Restoration Study, and the Conservation Commission and the Norwood Sportsmen's Association are
Thank you.
co-applicants for this project. Do you need help presenting, or you got the whole thing?
I'll start if I can. Then Mike can join in. You're welcome to come up too.
Great, thanks,
So you're on the
Carly.
next slide, Carly, when you.
Yeah. This is a presentation about the Guile Pond feasibility report. You can see photos of Guile Pond up here. This is the Sportsmen's Association building. Got the pond in front. This is part of the spillway that needs work. It's compromised. The earthen part of the dam is also compromised with wildlife burrows. Here you can see snapping turtle eggs, for instance. This is one of the fishing derbies that the Sportsman Association has run annually for many years. Mike can speak more to that. Okay, next slide, please. The proposal overview is a request for $200,000 to produce a feasibility report that investigates how best to manage Guile Pond and its surrounds. Guile Pond is owned and managed by the Conservation Commission. The Sportsman Association leases the property from the Conservation Commission for like $1 a year. The Sportsman Association is a building on that property. The pond has an earthen dam. that is compromised at this point, that we are looking at, what should we do with the pond? What are the ideal uses of the parcel? And this will help to inform us about what to do about the earthen dam, for instance. So we want this feasibility to consider the current state of the pond, the dam, and the site, its past, present, and future potential use for the parcel of land and the pond, what the community vision is for that parcel, the ecological, recreational, and stormwater management functions of the parcel, and public safety. Okay, next. The co-applicants on this funding request are the Norwood Conservation Commission and also the Norwood Sportsmen's Association, and Mike Reagan can speak more to the Sportsmen's Association. We've gone through these points here. Okay, next slide, please. This is our site. It's surrounded with this yellow circle here. It receives water from Willett Pond through a brook, bubbling brook here. The water travels from Guile Pond down to Ellis Pond, and then from Ellis Pond it crosses Route 1A and goes into a small pond and continues. But this is our focus right here. You could see Nichols Street up here. This is the Sportsmen's Association building and a parking lot. I guess I will point out also that the pond is surrounded by woods and homes. Pond is about 2 1/3 acres in size. The pond is created by a dam. It's on town-owned land and it's open to the public. We've gone over these other points. Okay, next slide, please. These are more photos of the pond. There's some areas that are woodsy. You can see a little path here and a birdhouse. Sometimes when the water is low, the vegetation is more exposed. The summer, the vegetation gets lush above the water, in the water. This is the spillway. This is the earthen dam over here. And here you can see an outlet. Okay, next slide, please. Current uses. The land and water supports nature exploration, fishing, birding, vista enjoyment. We've chatted about the issues around the earthen dam and the spillway. The issue with the spillway is it allows extra water to leave, which lowers the pond level. It makes it more difficult for fishing, for boating. One more issue is that I think much of the public isn't aware of the pond. It's not visible from the road per se. There is a sign, there is a parking lot where you can access the pond. If you live in the neighborhood, you know, and can walk there. But I think outreach would help to inform more of the town about this resource. Okay, next photo. So in talking about what might come out of this plan, we talked to the public, we talked to the abutters. We could do dam repair or replacement. That will be looked into. That would produce higher water levels, helping fishing and boating. If the pond were dredged and aquatic vegetation were managed, that would help with any boating and fishing. There was mention by someone of interest in a dock. If you put a dock in the water, it could help with fishing or boating. The other end of this is dam removal. What would that do? It would create a stream through the property. It would become a different kind of a park. If you added picnic tables or benches, that would add another use. People could sit, they could enjoy lunch. If we added more paths, potentially in the future, they could connect two paths in the woods, maybe down to Ellis Pond, for instance, which would improve walking in our community. Okay, next. So our aim through this project is to gather enough information about the dam and the desires of the community to pick a direction for the dam project. So what we would like to do is fund a feasibility study in which consultants look at this parcel of land and this pond and see what is plausible. What are the current conditions? And what does the public want, and how could we make this happen? When we submitted this funding request, we had a whole list of potential things that a consultant could do. And that was like the maximum range, $200,000. If we pare down that list, it reduces the amount of funding that's required. So we sort of had like a broad menu of items. We want to include community engagement, so community meetings. Let's see, so we want to look at options for repairing, replacing, or removing the spillway and dam, and implementing a broader strategy for facilitating recreational use and sustaining ecological health of the pond. If you could go to the next page. So other project components are conceptual design and concept level drawings of design alternatives for the pond and the land. Public meetings, a technical memorandum that describes the analysis, including project alternatives to remove, restore, or rebuild the dam to protect surrounding infrastructure and protect and restore wetland, riverine, and riparian habitat, and provide a recommended alternative. And also provide cost estimates for bringing the preferred approach to completion. Okay, next page. And then this was a whole sort of smorgasbord of potential activities of the consultants. I don't think I will go down this entire list. It's 2 pages long of all these different options, unless you would like me to. And we go to the next slide. So this funding would be to produce a feasibility study. And then we would apply for other funding to actually implement the project that's decided upon. Okay, next page. This project seemed to us to meet the CPA funding criteria. It's consistent with existing town plans. For instance, the open space and recreation plan mentioned that the dam at Guile Pond needs to be repaired. I could go through each of these, but I guess I would just say we think that it fits the criteria for the CPC funding. Next page. It also supports the Norwood Sustainability Action Plan under public health by creating physical environments that promote good health, increasing access, encouraging participation in physical activity, supporting mental health and physical health through that. In terms of resiliency and natural resources, it's looking into the cost of repairing or removing existing dams. Okay, next page. Project timeline. In the summer of 2025, we would hire a consultant to do the feasibility study, and the consultant would begin work in the autumn of 2025. And these are previous CPC projects, which I went over in the last slide, and that's my contact information. And here's Mike from the Sportsman's Association.
Yeah, so just for some background, my name's Mike Reagan. I've been a member of the Norwood Sportsman's Club for 35 years. I've actually been affiliated with the club for about 70 years, well actually 60 years, starting back in 1963 when I and another group of young boys started a Boy Scout club at the Sportsman's Hall, along with the leadership. And a couple of things I wanted to add, if we could go back, and just so you know, I'm the current treasurer of the club, and I have been for, I'm starting to get excited by some of these numbers, but I have been for 34 years. And I'm happy to say that the club is still in place. To give you some background, we average between 70 and 100 members at any one given point in time. And one of the things that sparked this whole conversation is that we've been having an annual fishing derby for Norwood youth for over 70 years now. And it's easy to remember that because I was born in '54 and the fishing derby started in '51 or '52. And what sparked all this is that when we looked at having our 2024 fishing derby, we ran into a problem because the makeshift spillway that we had built probably 25 years ago with the help of the Norwood DPW. I guess we did a pretty good job because it lasted at least 25 years until this past winter. You might recall in the January, February timeframe, we had some very unusual heavy rains last winter, and that created a significant overflow situation from Willett Pond, which feeding into Guile Pond overwhelmed the dam. And just for reference, Guile Pond was formed back in the mid to late 1800s when they formed Willett Pond by making this into an earthen dam. And then, as we all know, Ellis Pond has a large earthen dam on this end of the pond. So this was an intermediate pond that was set up with an earthen dam that forms this pathway right here. And the spillway that we're talking about is right here. So what happened during that storm last winter, it basically washed out the far end of the work that we had done, putting us in a situation where the pond level had dropped down and we couldn't hold a fishing derby. So as we had done in the past, we had gone in front of the Conservation Commission asking for permission to put in another temporary spillway. And as I said, the last, quote, temporary spillway we got 25 years out of. But we were looking for something to do quickly. So I think if you go forward to one of these next slides, one of these here, you can see this is the temporary part of the fix that we just did. Because this right here was actually part of the spillway that we had built about 25 years ago. And it was the far end of it here that washed out. So this is the temporary spillway that we had to build, and Matt and I had the thrill of putting in about 240-pound sandbags that I'm still feeling the effects from. But it's been very effective. And so the question's got to be with this whole process is, you know, do we wipe all this out and put in a brand new professional spillway? That would be the club's preference, because this fishing derby that we hold every year typically gets 60 to 80 children that get to learn the sport of fishing. And I don't know if you have it in the package or not, but it's something that we typically hold every year in the April-May timeframe. And one of the challenges that we have is that you can see here the pond later in the year gets loaded up with a tremendous amount of lily pads, which kind of ruins the ability to cast lines in and go fishing. So what we dream about at the club would be the ability to dredge the pond out while you're fixing the spillway, so that you could have less of this type of growth in the pond and hold it at that. And I also wanted to mention that in my research, some of you may or may not be familiar with the Massachusetts Department of Dams. And back in 2012, they did a statewide study of all the dams from a safety standpoint. And as some of you may know, there was work that was done at the Willett Pond earthen dam to replace the valves and the spillway, because they were not considered to be adequate enough if we were to have like a 6-inch rainfall in a couple of days, okay? And from what I understand by looking at the public information online, they considered Guile Pond and its earthen dam and spillway to be insignificant from a safety standpoint, so they didn't rate it as at high risk, moderate risk, or low risk. They just call it NA, because they say that there's enough area downstream from that spillway behind the KFC and what used to be the Jewish Temple, now the Jain Center, that it wouldn't even create a problem for any of the residents. So I think for us to be able to go in and clean up this spillway wouldn't run into any significant state resistance either, because of the fact that it's been evaluated and been considered to be a non-essential water body that wouldn't be a problem if we went back in and fixed it again. So, so that kind of gives you some background information as to what brought all this to the surface, and hopefully we can find a way to keep this pond in place. And as Carly said, we've started to see more use at the pond lately than we have for quite a while. I mean, it was kind of nerve-wracking for me, because a few days ago there were teenagers skating on the pond. And I tried to explain to them where the water inflow is from Willett Pond and where the exit is, so they could keep all their skating more towards our club building. Because to be honest, from a skating standpoint, the nice thing is the water there is about 3 feet deep. So the only thing that gave me any comfort was the fact that if they did somehow fall through, they wouldn't go very far. They might get awfully cold, but we wouldn't have to worry about calling the fire department. But we would just love the opportunity to preserve our fishing derby. There's just a few pictures that Carly added into this presentation, but one of the things that we started to do at the club 30 years ago is we actually take 125, 150 photographs that we used to have to rush to the 1 hour photo across from the police station to get them developed. Now we do it digitally, but we hand out these pictures, which are basically candid stills of the children and their families when they're fishing. And I've seen generations of families come through this process, and it's kind of amazing to see. And hopefully, as we discussed and as Carly mentioned, there's a whole litany of options that have been listed in this package. And personally, when we got the feedback from the gentleman at Pear,
David Kemet.
Yes, it was comprehensive, and you know, one of the options is, yeah, just completely take out the spillway and turn it into a stream going through there. And while I was doing the work with Matt on putting in that temporary spillway, Tom Easy, who is the gentleman that lives in that property right there at the spillway, came out and was very interested in what the heck I was doing. And I didn't know if he was going to be happy that I was putting the spillway back in or not. And it turned out that he was very excited about us putting the spillway back in, because he and his wife bought that property because they've done a very nice job of having their property basically roll right into the pond, and they love the pond, okay? And we've had a heron 3 years ago take up a nesting spot in the pond. And if you ever go up there in the summertime, you get to see this massive heron come in for a glide landing and then take off over the trees. And that's just one of the nice things about the area that we have going on there. So, but if there's any other questions that I can answer for you about the club, and I also wanted to mention, I don't want to be remiss, we basically have been the caretakers of this property. As I've said, I can speak for at least 70 years and probably longer than that, and our goal would be to continue to maintain that. We cut the grass, and Carly was very good at reminding us that we have to maintain a vegetated buffer around the pond. And so we've started to cut the grass in such a way that we can do more of that and try to keep up with the conservation rules and stuff. I think we've got a lot of the elements we need to make this work. And when you look at the requirements for CPC funding, I think we pretty much hit all of them on the head.
Great, thanks, Mr. Reagan.
Okay.
Ms. Rockland.
Okay.
Any questions from the committee? Cheryl, we'll start with you and come on down. Joe, and then.
I have a question for Carly. Carly, when if this gets approved and you guys are able to do the study, is there a way to ask them who's doing the study if there's a way to have the look into having the Army Corps of Engineer do the dredging? Because I know they do dredge a lot of the ponds in the state.
That's interesting. I would look into it.
Okay.
Joe Sheehan.
Yeah, I just had a question on the public access there. Where is the public access? Is it just the Sportsman Club, or is there other access?
Publicly, it's probably all through the Sportsman's, because there are private houses on the other sides of the pond. So that's really the only easy access. But if you come down Nickel Street from St. Tim's, the Sportsman's Club is on the right there just before the KFC. And there's two entrances there, and we've got an open parking lot that is access to the public as well.
Is that
Oh,
right?
there you go.
Yeah.
Yes,
And is that's open to anyone?
yes, yes.
And Joe,
And-
I'll just add that as part of Concom, like, supporting this project and moving forward, we had a lot of discussions about public access, and that the public access isn't advertised. And so we talked about, if we move forward doing anything, part of the conditions of doing this project would be a more broad advertisement of this being public use and encouraging the community to use this improved asset if we move forward with the project.
Well, on that, I think the pond further down, there is public access. I know that we got that easement way back when on the planning board with Steve Costello was around. And what they did was they put a sign up. So there is a sign that designates.
There is a
There is,
sign
yep.
right at that entrance.
Yep,
There's a
agreed.
sign that says Guile Pond, public land. And that's been up there for quite a while now. But to your point, I don't think it's really been
It's not
advertised
marketed, right?
much.
Yeah.
And when you drive by on Nickel Street, typically you really can't see the pond. I mean, if you know it's there, you can look and see it for a flash, but you have to basically pull down in there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Joe, agree? John, I'll
Just
come to you
a
next.
couple, this is an area, and it's a really nice piece of property that, I don't know if 90 people in town don't know it exists, but there's definitely a predominance of the people in town
Yes.
that don't know it exists. And whenever you say Guile Pond, they kind of merge that in with all the other ponds that are in the area, and it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. So I'm happy that it is getting the attention it deserves. Couple of questions. You mentioned, Carly, that it is on town-owned land. Is there, similar to at Ellis Pond, where there's a 2 or 3, I don't know what let's say 5 feet, the 5 feet bank from the water, distance from the water that the town owns, there's a certain amount of buffer that goes all the way around Ellis Pond. So is that the same case at Guile?
Yeah, protect there's wetlands around the pond, so some of the conservation regulations would apply to this area for sure.
So the abutting property owners don't own into the water, basically. There's a certain amount of space between the waterfront and their property. Is that?
I think I would have to look at the parcel maps, the assessor's maps. I don't know.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And then just a question on the application. There's a page that says Guile Pond Restoration with a project budget on it. And the estimated project cost is a range from $165,000 to $200,000. The largest component of it, and there's 12 to 15 components of it, but the largest dollar amount is the dam removal feasibility study. And out of that, let's say 200,000, 50,000 is on that one line item for the dam removal feasibility. So when we say the preference is to retain a spillway, which to me is comparable to, or it's French for a dam, but we're looking at the part of the goal is to try to keep some amount of water retention in the pond, whatever form that takes, if it's a pure dam or if it's a spillway or whatever. So I'm kind of curious that the fact that we've got this labeled as a dam removal, like the word removal, dam removal feasibility study, can we, logically, can we remove the word removal? And is it more of a dam evaluation?
I think that
If I was just looking at that one piece of paper, I'd say, okay, well, they're going in the direction of removing the dam, and it
Right.
doesn't seem like that's the goal.
So it sounds like the wording should be edited. Yeah.
And the wording's fine, just a clarification on it.
I think we want to take a look at all the potential options and find out what the community wants, what the majority of the community would like to see. So look at all the different alternatives
Yeah.
for that land.
Okay.
Okay.
And the other question, I'm following Mike, and I know the Conservation Commission is following activity in Walpole where they're heading down the path of replacing the spillway at Bird Pond,
Yes.
right? So there is work that's on the near horizon in Walpole. So I think, this is comparable work, but I'm curious, you mentioned that this is what the state considers a non-essential waterway and
From
or-
a safety standpoint.
From a
yes.
safety.
Yes.
So given that, do we, scale of 1 to 10, do we think that may actually work not in our favor if we get past this project and maybe go for additional funding to either dredge or replace the spillway, like move forward with whatever the feasibility study outcome is? Do we think they're going to say, the state is going to say, we're not going to help you because it's a non-essential waterway? Like, could that occur?
I think it will probably depend on what sort of funding we reach for, that we apply for, and what their standards are.
Okay.
All set, Joe?
Yep, thank you.
Mr. Hall? And then Cheryl next.
First off, compliments to you both. This is a very detailed proposal. It's clear, and you can see what you're getting for your money in various different configurations. I would like to recommend some rethinking of what the options are that you end up building your study around. I'll use as an example, when our first project was providing some additional funding for the reconstruction of the chapel. And after much discussion, they had 3 options. One was basically so basic, all it would do was allow it to stand. The next level up, which is the one we selected, would allow people to have small meetings and make some uses of it. And the third was put the rock speakers in and let them shake the walls and you'll be fine. And this was very valuable because we could see the cost consequences of going up a level or up 2 levels and so forth. Well, I think I'm reading the sample recommendations as basically being there are 3 levels of intervention on the dam itself. One is repair, one is replacement, and one is whatever you meant by dam removal. And so those would be a way of organizing 3 options. Dredging would then become an option to add on to either of any of these, and you could describe it as sort of a 1A, 2A, 3A, and cost if you're doing these other things or if you're not. The other 3 things that you've listed here, dock construction, picnic table and benches installation, and path construction, they're not about doing something to the pond or the dam, really. And I think those might be better deleted from this proposal and held for later proposals so that you can add clarity to the proposal. I would mention as an aside, you said the water's 3 feet deep so people wouldn't get in too much trouble if they fell through the ice. They might if they're elementary school kids. And one of these things is producing higher water levels. So you might actually want to have as a bit of a sidebar in your final report implications for people who want to skate on the pond during the winter months, and maybe nudge the people who are overseeing it toward asserting more control over that when it might be dangerous.
Right. And just to be clear, the 3-foot water level is the water level when we're at the spillover point on the spillway, so that we're not trying to increase that unless we talk about dredging, at which point in time there's going to be some earthen removal from underneath the pond. But I think as we talk about this, one of the things that Carly and I haven't had a lot of time to talk about is, in my opinion, if we poll the neighbors, and everybody is really high on keeping the pond in place, okay, that's going to help us better understand what direction we want to take, and I'd be curious to hear what this committee has to say about that, because that could help us kind of narrow our focus and maybe not overspend in areas that aren't going to be of any benefit if we go down that path.
Just
Go ahead, follow up.
follow up. You'll want to spend some time thinking about how to ask the question, so you don't make it sound like it's too easy to just say, oh, I like everything, without having dealt with the cost differences
Right.
of everything. The other question I have is, I did some research on all of this as I was documenting the fact that your club is one of the oldest still operating non-governmental entities in Norwood,
Yeah.
with a proud history, and you've described some of that. But in the early days, one of the things that was complicating was that big pond on the west is co-owned by more than one town. And there was a fair amount of difficulty in coordinating the views of the other owner, which I think has more of that pond, in terms of its implications for if you do this or you don't do this, it's going to make things good or it's going to make things bad downstream where we're actually focusing our attention. Do you see any need to get into that, or has that problem faded with time and ownership changes?
Well, I think with the Conservation Commission in Norwood having ownership of the land and the pond, there's no contradiction or conflict with anybody else that I'm aware of. And I think the state and the Conservation Commission has already been working with, I'm not sure what they call that land trust now that owns Willett Pond, because obviously there would have been a concern if there was a significant risk with the earthen dam that feeds into Guile Pond. But to my knowledge, with the changes that just took place that I think are right on the verge of being completed, with the 2 valves that were replaced that will control the flow from Willett Pond into Guile Pond, and the redo of the spillway that was done, I'm losing track of time now, but probably 10 years ago, when that spillway was rebuilt.
Yeah, I'm not certain when that was built, but we haven't, I guess I would like to learn more about the concern over multiple towns having say over Willett Pond.
If
and
what
how
I
that affects Guile
discovered about the way things were 100 years ago is still applicable today, then anything that's going to affect or require changes in the configuration and management of that big western pond
Yeah.
that sends the water that all the other subsequent rivers and ponds draw from, they would have a say. And clearly you've gotten into this enough to be fairly confident that for this project, even at its most ambitious, that's not going to be an issue, and I'm happy to leave it at that.
Yeah, the Conservation Commission sees the different work that's being proposed for the dam on Willett Pond, for instance. They came before us. We looked at that as well. And so we also own Guile Pond, so we're in the know.
Okay.
I'd also say, with all due respect, we're hoping we're going to do more public outreach than just the neighbors, because
Yeah.
if we're going to spend this amount of money,
Yes.
we want to make sure that it's a
Right.
public asset for everybody, so.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Cheryl, I think you had a question?
I just, when I was reading back through here, one of the things you guys were looking at was boats. So when I think of boats, I think of motorized. And I know when I was on the Conservation Commission a while back, we had a restriction on any boat on Ellis. It couldn't be motorized because of the fact that you can end up getting oil, etc., into the waterways. So I think instead of using the word boat, you might want to use kayaks, canoes,
Rowers.
non-motorized
Yes.
boats, like rowing machines and that.
Yes.
And then to follow up probably on John, I know way back when, again, when I was on Concom, we always had a concern about the Willet that, because at one point they wanted to remove the dam, and we had a concern about that because if that water comes downstream, it overflows Guile, then it overflows Ellis, which then floods South Norwood. So we were always against it. So I think it's a great idea to have Guile dredged because then it holds more water, even though some of it will evaporate during the summertime. It also keeps the vegetation, like, I don't know if there's those Japanese water chestnuts that love the Ellis, but the deeper the water is, the harder for the sun to penetrate. But then it'll also, if upstream at Willett, if they open the dam to release some of the water downstream, which is Guile, it will allow you to hold more water, which helps Ellis, which helps South Norwood. So it kind of like has a trigger point.
Great, thanks, Cheryl. Deb, any comments?
Yeah, I have a quick question. I love that old building. How old is the building, the Sportsman Club?
Well, that's an interesting question because the club was formed in 1921, and believe it or not, the gentlemen that were in the club at the time built the building, started off with just a foundation and basically a flat roof over it, which is now the club's floor. But that was the way the club existed for quite a while. And then just after World War II, and I don't know exactly where these barracks used to be, somewhere up around the cemetery. They tore these barracks down from World War II, and the members of the Sportsman's Club said, hey, what are you going to do with all that timber? And that timber was what was used to build the building. And I'm thinking it was 1949, something like that, that they built the building. And that's where the timber came from.
Well, I kind of asking because maybe we have multiple funding sources, and I see Mrs. Esco's in the audience this evening, and maybe because it's a very cool old building, I think.
All right, thanks, Deb. Any questions from the audience? Tony?
Actually, my husband and I live on Endicott Street for 42 years, and the whole time we've lived there, we've advocated for good repair and management of the dams. And back in the late 90s, finally, the dam across from Big Y there at the pond got modernized, and I understand, I think there was recently a lower outlet repair and management there, as well as the one up at St. Tim's, which was also a concern of ours, because we felt if the dam by St. Tim's breached, and I know it's privately owned by the landowners, but if that should breach, it puts a lot of pressure on the dam across from Big Y at the pond there. And believe me, we have seen the brook crest before, as it did 4 years ago when Norwood Hospital flooded. That brook breached all the way down to the end of our street. You couldn't go around Commerce Ave in a circle the way you're supposed to because it went over. So we had to come back up the street on the wrong side. I said, oh my God, I hope a car doesn't come this way. So the management of the water there is very important to us because, of course, it's all connected. So what I would be very supportive of this project. I think it's very interesting. I'm very familiar with the area. I walk Nickel Street often. I love that little piece of conservation land that we got a hold of several years ago on Nickel Street. It's beautiful there. And it is an area that should be enjoyed maybe a little bit more publicly. You've got the parking lot, you've got the club. It's absolutely gorgeous. I'm very familiar with the Heron. We get it at the end of our street too. And so it's just a beautiful area. I also think that if the dam stayed, not that it's huge, 3 feet or what, it's another little stepping stone of security and slow down for the egress of water up at St. Tim's as it comes down to Walpole Street. So I'd be very interested in seeing the professional opinion of either repair, restore, replacement, removal, whatever. But I think it's a very good suggestion and use of CPC investigation money.
Great, thanks, Tony. Anybody else in the audience? Anybody online? Okay, all right. Thank you, Carly and Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you both.
Yeah. All right, so we'll move on to the Washington Heights roof replacement.
I'm in order. So shouldn't do much of a delay.
Thank you.
These parting gifts.
Always.
Okay, love it.
Hopefully everything organized in one comprehensive guide for the board to hopefully
so
make
much.
a good decision in my favor. Shouldn't say it out
All right, have at it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for the opportunity for the Housing Authority to come against the board again to ask for some more much-needed funding to, again, always preserve our true asset in the town of public housing, but also as a way to increase what we're already planning to do. The Norwood Housing Authority is planning to replace roofs at our Washington Heights development on Jefferson Drive and Roosevelt Avenue. Washington Heights was built in 1951 as a veterans housing development. There's 75 units of housing, over 51 buildings. The description of the project is the roofs have reached the end of life. There are a few that are just getting there, but 90% are there, and we know in the next year or two the remainder will get there. The goal of the Housing Authority is to maximize all funds that we have in a way to preserve an asset for our town, a much needed housing community that Norwood and the state is in just very much need of in the housing crisis that we currently have. Right now we're working with the Executive Office of Housing and Community Livable, Executive Office, EOHL's Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. I put that in there wrong,
They keep
sorry.
changing the name.
And what we're doing is hopefully increasing our budget to allow more roofs to be done. Sorry, here's the next slide. The goal of this is to protect the housing structure, not the residents, from future injury, harm, or destruction. This is a memo that was put out in 2013 by the former agency DHCD. As part of that memo that was released, roofing projects are specifically mentioned. CPC as a protection of personal real property from injury, harm, or destruction. The following list, as from DHCD again, says roofing, siding, window replacements to assure water tightness of housing. Scope of the project. Right now, the Housing Authority is planning to hopefully do 26 buildings out of the 51 with a cost estimate of $754,000. As of right now, the Housing Authority, working with the state, has merged two phases of this roofing replacement to hopefully maximize what we can do for construction costs, cutting down on design costs and making one bigger project. For us to hopefully reach our estimated $754,000, we need an additional $287,000. I would not come to this committee asking for all of that, knowing that there are resources across the state for us to also leverage. So our request for the CPC of $175,000 allows us to go to HILAP, which is the, I always get this wrong, High Leverage Asset Preservation Program with the state to receive potentially up to a 2.5 times match of what a local CPC, CPA can give to a housing authority. One back, sorry. I might be out of order. Go forward one. So what this means for us, with an estimate from our state designer, the Housing Authority is looking at two different types. There is a triplex, which has 3 2-bedroom units, or a ranch, which is a 3-bedroom, and a duplex, obviously, which is 2 2-bedroom units, giving us either $30,000 for the triplex or $20,000 for a ranch or duplex. This obviously is just an estimate. We won't know what final costs are until we go to bid. But right now, our architects and engineers go out, look at the cost of current projects across the state to give us the best estimate for what we can have. If the Housing Authority is able to get the $350,000, we'll be able to hit our benchmark of the 26 units plus an additional 3. But again, we won't know until we get to that next stage of bidding. Why this project meets the CPA requirements. The project will save a threatened resource and a currently underserved population. The project will leverage additional public and/or private funds. The project is supported by the property owner, the Norwood Housing Authority. The project can demonstrate long-term sustainability with respect to operational and maintenance costs. And the project, again, is a capital improvement, not a routine maintenance. The reason why, this is where I was looking for before. As I mentioned, and obviously out of order, our goal to use the HILAP allows us to get that additional funds from the state. We have actually received a guarantee from the state already of a 1-to-1 match. If the board and the town approve this project, depending on the timing, we could go closer to that 2.5 times what the CPC would allow for us. As I just said, Avalon McLaren, the Director of Project Management for EOHLC, has said, without knowing when we'll receive your application and what other applications will come in that time, he can guarantee that will be funded for a 1-to-1 leverage from the CPC. What I gave here is just a little schematic of what this additional money means for the Housing Authority. Those small X's, and by no means are those the specific units, but it shows to us on a concept plan of when we do this project and if we're able to secure this money, these are the units that we could possibly start adding. So again, hitting home on the capital improvement and not routine maintenance, because I think it's our job as the Housing Authority to come to you with a well thought out plan, but also reasons to take all the questions off of your hands if possible to show why we actually are eligible for this money, because housing authorities have a very small way to use CPC money the way that everything is currently written up. So this is a capital improvement, reconstruction or alteration of real property that, one, is going to materially add value to the real property. It becomes part of the real property or permanently affixed to the real property, so the removal would cause damage to the property of the article itself. And it is intended to become a permanent installation and is intended to remain there for an indefinite period of time. Again, hitting home on this importance for myself of why preservation and why it's not routine maintenance. Routine maintenance is property that is reoccurring activities that a taxpayer expects to perform as a result of the taxpayer's use of any properties designated. That's the IRS code. Either way, that would be a replacement of a shingle or an area where we're replacing an entire roof. We're creating weather tightness for our buildings. We're preserving the public housing, the family housing that is needed for the town. So in conclusion, the Housing Authority has had Washington Heights on Jefferson Drive and Roosevelt Ave for roughly 75 years. It's our goal to provide safe and sanitary affordable housing for those families that live there. It's our obligation to our residents, both through our mission and the state sanitary code, to maintain the property's foundations, floors, walls, doors, windows, ceilings, roofs, staircases, porches, chimneys, and other structural elements. And finally, thank you for giving me this opportunity to come to you tonight. I've tried to be brief because I know there are a lot of important things going on in front of this committee. I don't want to take up too much time. But I also thought, with the unfortunate passing of our past president, Jimmy Carter, I thought his work with Habitat for Humanity, it was actually a good way to kind of cap what our hopes are for the Housing Authority and how we hope to work with the town and this committee. One of the basic human rights is having a decent place to live and raise a family. I truly believe that's what the Housing Authority is giving our opportunity to these town residents. So I hopefully can dispel any questions or concerns that this committee may have for this hopeful money that I think will be a great project for us in the state. Thank you.
Great, thanks, terrific quote. Any comments, questions from the committee members?
Debbie has her hand up.
Oh, sure, Deb, you go.
Just, are you putting a new layer on the majority of them, or are they ripping it all the way down?
Sorry. We're going all the way down. We're taking everything off, we're going down, we'll go everything to the substrate, make sure that the roof is fully capable of supporting a brand new roof system. The Housing Authority actually on top of this project will be adjudicating all of the roofs for potential solar or any other energy efficiencies down the road. That's not part of this project right now, but with the way the state is moving most of our capital projects, there's always a component to make sure that there are future ways to decrease the use of fossil fuels and the way to best preserve our state and our public housing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other, we'll go Joe.
Just a comment, I like the way you're leveraging additional public funds. I know that that's one of the key things you do as a professional, and it really gives us more bang for the buck, so it's a great project, and the fact that we are preserving housing is just as important as creating new units. Between recently and now this again, and you were before us before, we've been able to do both. So it's been a while before we got to the housing portion of CPA, but I think we're on the right track.
I think we are, and I've talked to Kristen offline many times that the Housing Authority plans to be back, not every year if we don't need to be, because again, we have our own sources of funding, but we do hope to hit that production piece at some point too. The Housing Authority obviously has to make sure what our current portfolio is and preserve that, but hopefully with all of these projects that we have planned, with the Affordable Homes Act that was passed, housing authorities are a big recipient of those state funds as well, the upwards of $2 billion across the state. So our hope again is to not only preserve what we have, bring it into current standards, but then focus hopefully on creation of units for our town. We're not there yet, but I will say our staff is working diligently to get there. So,
Thanks.
Thank you.
Patty? Oh, and then we'll go to you, Matt.
I'm bouncing off what Joe just said. The HILAP funding is huge. That really is huge. And the fact that we could possibly get 2.5 to 1, in my head, I'm sitting here thinking, might this be the time to maybe give a little extra money from CPC, get the whole project done? To me, it would make more sense to get it all done at once as opposed to bringing the crews back out different times and the equipment, blah, 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 whatever. Also, my concern is the last newsletter that came out from CPC is talking about trying to push money toward acquiring and producing housing as opposed to preservation. So we've had several projects this year getting taken right off the table. In my head, I'm thinking, might we be wise as a board to give some extra money, I don't know, maybe 200 or 225, something like that, and see if we could possibly get that higher level of matching funds from HILAP and get the whole project done at once.
Interesting. Okay, Amanda?
I don't want to derail that thought because I am very curious about that proposal, but I did want to just briefly compliment the very specific detail and citations on the line between maintenance and capital. I think it's really important for these kinds of projects, and I thought that was well presented, and it's very clear, exactly where the delineation is, so I just wanted to make sure to call that out.
Thank you. Thanks, Amanda. John Hall?
I want to echo what you've heard about the quality of the proposal, especially on those points that will be held to task on. I want to focus, though, on the various versions of the project would cover 1/2 to 3/4 of your roof. How soon would the remaining units become unusable, uninhabitable?
So the Housing Authority would never let a unit become uninhabitable. The Housing Authority has our own operational reserves, which we do hold money for that specific reason. The Housing Authority right now, again, has been on top of our routine maintenance, which is separate from this project. We constantly, every year, go through our buildings. We have to do annual inspections, one, to make sure that not only the roofs, but all utilities, all operations in these units are up to standard and working. But when we do that, we are looking for leaks, we are looking for any penetrations, and if there are some, we do have the ability to get contractors, vendors in to make repairs. So with us hoping to do half to 3/4, depending on if the board here is able to approve favorably and bring it to town meeting, and if HILAP is able to, again, match at a 1-to-1 or possibly a 2.5%, we're going to be getting closer to that 75% threshold or more, depending on what the bids come in. We would continue to just maintain, we would continue to do routine maintenance, independent of what is left. That's where, in my mind, the Affordable Homes Act comes in with that influx of capital money to the Housing Authority. We would then prioritize the remaining units to get those as close done as possible to this. That way, again, we're looking at a whole development at one fell swoop of similar to a 20, 25, 30-year shingle, as opposed to having half done now and the next half done in 15 years and always being on that cycle, because again, we try not to take off roofs when they are operational and they are working properly. It's just, these have been identified by the state, so we're hoping to maximize what we can, and we do have that small remainder to just prioritize that in the next few years.
Would it be an overstatement to say that you'll actually be saving some money on the back end because the ones that have been re-roofed are not going to need year-to-year repairs at the same pace as has been the case?
That is definitely true. The project in front of you now, to give a brief history to the board, but also everyone standing out here, is not the original application that I gave to the CPC. The original application I gave to the CPC was phase 1. When we got to the final application, it was phase 1 and phase 2 combined. Where I'm standing at today is actually having cost estimates to actually give, hopefully, our best numbers of what percentage of the units we're hoping to do. So again, we're hoping to increase our construction costs by bundling as many houses we can now through one design cost by just making the project bigger, because with the state level, the work that they do has a certain percentage that the state allows, so they definitely have a cost limit to what they're spending on that. So it is the best bang for our buck to combine projects and do as much as we can, and that's why coming to the CPC allows us to leverage outside money from the state again to hopefully increase our scope, increase the amount of units that we're hoping to do, and get as close to 100%. That's never guaranteed, again, because public bidding is public bidding, and unfortunately, you never know where it's going to go with responsible bidders, but we do our best to keep everyone at high standards and keep everyone to our cost estimates. So,
Great, thanks. Any other questions?
Just a comment, Patty had a great idea. I don't know how or if you can run with that at this point. I don't know if anyone has any idea on that.
and so building off of Patty's, I will say, wonderful, wonderful offer. I think it would come down to what the committee feels comfortable with. Knowing that the general cost estimate of a ranch or a duplex is roughly $20,000. I do think that is high, but obviously with prevailing wage and everything that 30B requires us to do for public bidding as a state entity, we can never say one is overestimating, because you never know what costs are truly going to come through. But any money with that guarantee from Avalon, the director of capital projects, if our scope was to increase from 175 to 200 or 225, that additional 25 or 50 now really becomes 50 or 100, because we're looking at that 1-to-1 match guarantee, potentially more than that. And $100,000 is an extra 5 units. And if we're going hopefully from, say, 75%, we're now getting closer to 80, 85%, potentially, again, not knowing where their match is going to be. So I would never say no. Again, this is up to the committee, and I put myself at your mercy for everything we're doing here, because again, you guys have been so responsive.
On that, if we were to up the amount of money with HiLab, or whatever they're called,
Yep, Tyler.
would they still match it? They're not stuck on what the proposal is at this time?
No, it's by virtue of their regulations, so their match is up to 2.5%. But they would definitely hit the 1-to-1 based on the money that they currently have. I'm trying to figure out what would be in order, a motion?
Well, that's what I'm wondering too. Is that something we would vote on tonight, or is that coming up for our discussion on the board later?
Yeah, I think when we vote recommendations, and maybe we can do a little bit of more discussions about that. And then you said that there's some other funding that's potentially coming?
So I know the CPC would be matched by the HiLab, but if we're unable to complete the project, or whatever percentage we are, we're looking for the Affordable Homes Act. That was the last bond bill passed by the state.
Right.
That's going to give an influx of capital money for housing authorities.
Do you know how that works? So the money would come
It's
directly
a
to
formula
housing?
based on the amount of housing that you have.
I see.
So roughly it's $2 billion over 5 years, but it's definitely going to be.
You don't have a sense of what your percentage is, right?
I think our annual contribution is typically around $350,000, $400,000. So I would hope it's maybe 500 more, closer to 6, depending. Again, I try not to get my hopes up too much, because we've been so lucky, I would say, in the last 5 to 10 years, which is different than the way housing authorities worked before, because it was always need grant-based.
Right.
And right now, we actually have annual allocations. So again, I try not to bite off more than we can chew, but we know there are going to be an influx of money based on the last bond bill, so.
Okay. All right. Joe?
If we're not going to act on it, but in the meantime, would it be proper for him to be able to amend his request, or how would we go about this?
Well, I think we should probably have some conversations. You probably need to run some numbers, like, maybe do a little bit of homework, like if we gave you an extra $25,000 or $50,000, or what would the amount be to do all of the units? Maybe that would help inform when we move forward for a recommendation.
Sure, I can happily do that.
Okay.
Amanda has one, Catherine.
Amanda?
Yeah, that's what would be super helpful for me, is seeing, the delineation of here's what it would look like at 100%, 85%, and then obviously what we already have here at the 75%.
A menu, right, yeah, good. Joe Greeley?
Just regardless of whether we go with the face value of what's been requested, or if we increase that in any way, what would, just given the project right now with the 26 units?
Yeah.
What's the timeline? Like, how long would it take to bring all 26 of those units up?
So right now, this project is already in the pipeline. It already has a work order from the state. We're actually finishing design currently. So this is time of the essence for ourselves, where we can make a recommendation to the board about potentially increasing, but we're hoping to go to bid in maybe the next month or two. So the state and HiLab is understanding that we won't receive a permanent yes or no until town meeting goes forward, if the board moves us forward. But we're hoping to kick off this summer for roofs, and once they get going, they're done pretty fast.
Just a follow-up. So just given that timeline, are we talking a year to do these 26 units?
No, it would be done in a matter of months.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, whoever wins the bid will be a contractor big enough to have multiple teams do multiple roofs at a time. Because again, for any contractor going out there, they want to minimize the time on property to maximize their profits.
The good news is construction prices are coming down slightly.
That's also what we're hoping for.
Yeah,
That's
they
why
are.
we look to hopefully bid in the winter to line up work for these companies coming in the spring and summer.
The interest rates are high too, so that works in our favor. So
Yeah.
It's good news, yeah. Okay, any other questions?
May I, Madam Chair?
Yeah, please do, Deb.
Good idea, Patty, but do these roofs need to be done? Have the rest of them outlived their useful life?
Yes, they are at the useful life now.
The ones that aren't included in your, to increase more money from the CPA?
Yeah, sorry.
I think you picked the worst 26 to start with.
I'm reading from the work order done last May, so obviously this has had more time to get worse. The existing asphalt shingle roofs of many of the buildings are or near the end of their useful life due to visual evidence of cupping and curling on the roofs, and they need to be replaced. I don't think we have a sense of where 100% are, but I mean, we've been on the roofs, we've been testing them, and this was the recommendation of the state saying that we are at the end of the useful life. And again, before John was asking about, is this helpful to us? I think replacing them now at the end instead of waiting to get to the extreme end will reduce our routine maintenance that we're dedicated to preserving the public housing. So I think it is a good use of money to get as many as we can done now, even if it's not at extreme usefulness, it's at end of life. It needs to be done.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks, Sean. Anybody else?
Nice job on the
Okay,
presentation.
yeah.
Thank you very
Thanks for
much.
the takeaway. All right, appreciate it. All right,
Ms. Homewood, I have one for you too.
Thank you.
great, thanks, Sean, I appreciate it. Okay, next up is
Thanks,
the
Sean.
Shared Housing Services Organization. I believe we have Sarah Dixon here. The applicant is the Community Development Department. Hi, Sarah.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm Sarah Dixon. I'm the Director of Community Development, and I'm presenting our request for another year of funding for the Shared Housing Services Organization. Briefly, because I know many of you are already familiar with this project, but the Shared Housing Services Organization is a regional collaboration with several other municipalities to procure a consultant who provides specialized housing services for each municipality. We realize kind of the benefit of shared costs resulting in reduced costs for each town that participates versus having to hire somebody to provide these services in-house. So this is year 3 of our participation in the SHSO. I will say we're probably only concluding the second full year of actual work with our consultant, since when we started this, it took a little bit of time to find a consultant and hire one for the group. But we've been working with Answer Advisory for about a year and a half now. And the basic services they provide are really related to community housing preservation. The core services are around maintaining compliance with all affordable housing programming on our subsidized housing inventory. So the subsidized housing inventory contains a wide portfolio of affordable housing, some of which is owned and maintained by the Housing Authority, some of which are represented in residential group home type facilities, and others participate in a variety of different programs through the state to obtain their deed restriction. A large portion of those units have participation in the local initiative program or local action unit program, where the town, by virtue of the deed restriction, is assigned the responsibility of the local monitoring agent, meaning we have annual certification responsibilities to ensure continued compliance with the program requirements on behalf of the landlords if it's a rental, and also the tenants or homeowners if it's affordable ownership. So a core service that the SHSO provider is bringing to the town is maintaining all of those compliance requirements, making sure that anything with an expiring use restriction that we're on top of, that we're reapplying if that's applicable, making sure that homeowners who own these affordable properties are aware of their obligations under the program. And then one thing that I've been working closely with this provider over just the last year is rolling out an annual audit program for renters who participate in these affordable programs. Anybody who is an income eligible household participating in an affordable rental program has to recertify annually and provide evidence that they continue to remain eligible for the program.
And the property managers usually provide a report that the consultant is reviewing. But we're designing an audit program where they actually do a sample of those recertification files and review the documentation and make sure that everything's exactly where it needs to be to ensure that the units stay on the SHI, they continue to comply with the program, but also that, kind of putting all of that aside, that these housing opportunities continue to remain available to households who really need them in our community. So that's a little bit about what the SHSO has done for us in the last couple of years. We intend to continue participation in this organization, and I think it's been a benefit for the town. And we respectfully request another year of funding from CPA.
Great, thank you. Questions from the committee members? Okay, Joe?
Debbie has one.
Joe and then Deb?
Just a point, as we kind of roll forward with town meeting in mind in May, everything you just said, obviously it's in the application, but I think people are, maybe the average town meeting member doesn't have all of that knowledge. So from a town meeting presentation standpoint, it would definitely be helpful if we could bulletize what you just said, so that people have a better, more clarity on what magic is being worked. Here's what we've done so far, here's what we're currently working on, here's the goals for next year. So those kind of things they bring to the forefront exactly what it is we're spending money on. So just a recommendation.
Great, thanks, Joe. Deb?
Sarah, is it the same person? Is the consultant the same?
The company is the same. Yeah, so Answer Advisory is the firm, and we've continued to work with them since the beginning. The individuals who work for the firm, there's been some changeover. So the point of contact that we've been working with has changed once since we began, but Answer retains the contract. Yes.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Questions from the audience? Great. Anybody online? All right. Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, great. Well, that concludes our public hearing presentations. All right, so we'll move on to project status updates.
So there's not much to report since the last meeting, with the exception of, maybe Cheryl can chime in on this, we did hear back from Mass Historic with yet another request for information on the National Register listing. So Cheryl will tell me on top of that, we'll be meeting with the Historic Commission to discuss how to move forward with this.
Okay, great. And that's it? Thanks, Parker.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
I heard that the airport playground is finished.
It is, the playground elements are in, the port in place can't be done until the spring because you have to have temperatures above.
That's what I thought, because the person who told me, I said they haven't done a closeout with this.
Yeah,
until we get a closeout to us, it's not officially done.
They had to temporarily stabilize the surface, so there are wood chips in there right now, but those will be removed and the port in place installed when they can.
So is it usable then?
Yes.
Right
Yeah,
now?
they have construction fencing around it, or they did last week when I went by, but I can talk to them about taking that down. It's perfectly usable.
Kids are playing on it? Okay.
I saw that the rec announced that they're going to have a grand opening like in April or something, like a ribbon cutting in the spring.
Okay. And that's it? Any other questions, comments? Okay. All right, we'll move on to the financial report. Joe and Kristen. Joe, you want to take that?
Sure. Kristen has updated and distributed the latest information. We met yesterday. Kristen and I met with Jeff O'Neill and staff at in the accounting office to just touch base on current status, end of year audit, things like that. We've been able to. They have been able to close out the year and provide an update on these numbers. And going forward, we have a good understanding of what we'll need as a committee and when we'll need it. Especially for tonight, and as we roll into these next couple of hearing nights. Obviously, it's important for us to know how much money we have to work with, and the status on the existing projects is equally important in an effort to try to close out some of those projects. So this is the same format as we've used in the past. We've got there's a balance column in there. The balance as of June 2024 of roughly 2.9 million. That 2.9 million includes, or all these figures as we roll to the right here in the green section. They do include the administrative budget. The third column of values and the fourth column are what town meeting voted in favor of this past May, or May of 2024. So projected revenue, $910,000. Presented projects at the time is just shy of 1.5 million. And I think, Kristen, that excludes the pollinator garden, right? We've pulled that out of this.
Oh, so this is just in the green is just the FY '25, what's been approved, not what's been proposed for '26.
Okay, right. Yep. So the projected balance as of June of 2025, 2.3 million. So we've got $633,000 in new projects that we're looking at in these years. So 600,000 versus 2.3 million that we've got to work with before we evaluate these new projects. Kristen's also added these at the top, the FY25 activity on the admin spending. And we've got, obviously in the blue section in the middle, we've got a significant number of projects in play. It would be great, some of these have been in play for quite a while, so obviously it would be great if we could close those out and look at the column, the total funding column. Any of the ones that don't have an amount next to the expenditures or the encumbrances, either it has not been started yet or it's complete and just waiting for a final eval and to be closed out. To Cheryl's point about the playground, for instance, so the sooner we can get these projects, any projects that we can close out, the sooner the better. So.
Hey, Joe, did we give shared housing $14,000 last year?
Yes.
We did. Okay.
Yep.
Got it. Thanks.
And just while we're talking, I think we all met Eric Fleming from the Finance Commission last year, but just to make sure we recognize Eric for joining us tonight. Eric is the liaison representative from the Finance Commission.
And hanging in.
And
Yeah.
definitely
Appreciate it.
So
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks for coming, Eric.
I'm just trying to figure out what the size of this paper is.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like a giant origami.
you did the paper, okay, just checking. I was like, wow,
The
okay.
local optometrist will
I
approve.
know. I was like, is this a Joe Greeley special?
Kristen's done a great job, certainly over the last 6 months, especially to work with the accounting staff. And Molly and Jeff have been great as far as trying to, rope off time and give us the appropriate attention that all of this activity deserves. So.
Right. Thanks, Joe. Any questions?
I do. Just curiosity. Under Lower Pond, the Alaviso, the remaining funds is $5,243. That's remaining, right?
Correct.
And I know they're done. Are they allowed to use the funds to give CPC a bigger sign, maybe underneath the Alaviso sign? Because it's like this big on the pavilion, and you can't really tell that was funded by us.
Certainly signage is something that would be within the scope, and that's something that you routinely ask for. It's interesting that you ask That I think we had reviewed a couple meetings ago, the proposal at Morris Hill, and you
Yeah.
all had wanted something larger and more prominent. And I know that Bob Donnelly and Mark Ryan are looking into an attractive alternative.
Yeah, remember it was the 3 signs? They were
Yeah.
all similar sizes and, it looked much more professional?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Catherine, is there any way that you could go back to Concom and do a bigger sign instead of that little tiny thing way up high? Because you have the Alaviso sign off to the left. If there could be like a runner underneath it that just says paid for by CPC funding, so when you drive by it, you actually see it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you have to be, I know it's paid for by, because I was one of the presenters on it,
So why would we need to go to Concom?
because it's your money.
Oh, we got got it. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Pre-me. Okay, yes,
'Cause
yes.
I might be wrong, but I think they'd have to vote, right?
If there's still money left in the project. I
There
don't
is, there's
think so.
5,000 and some.
Yeah, well, I'm
You
sure
know,
we could
'cause,
get a
like,
larger
your-
sign for
Your
that.
sign goes like this, but then you have the post and you have all this free airspace here. So just something could run like just so big, so that way people driving to the end of Endicott or whatever, they see that, hey, CPC paid for this beautiful pavilion and everything, and it might just generate more thought
Sure.
to
Yeah.
the public that this is what can be done.
Yeah, let me go back and I'll report back.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah,
Not
great.
meaning to spend money, but hey.
No, but, well, that's one of the things we're sort of clamoring for, and I think the Trails Committee has brought that up. It would be really great if we had a signage standard here in the town, but I don't think anybody's taken the ball and run with that. But it really would be helpful, because there's lots of different logos on, and font types and everything. Yeah.
All right, thank you, I appreciate it.
Sure. Anybody else? Okay, correspondence? It was all in the queue now?
Yeah, that was all in the queue now.
Yep, nothing earth-shattering, okay. And so the next meeting will be on
Can
January...
I just take a moment to publicly thank Emily for all of your hard work?
Yes, thank you, Emily.
Yeah.
We will miss you, but we're happy for
She'll be
you,
here
and we will
next
still
week.
see you
Yeah,
around. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Patty, that was
Excited, I will
great.
see most of you at town meetings. And we all come to get sworn in.
Yes, you will.
That's awesome.
And if you ever want to come back, please let us know, feel free.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. That was great, Patty, thank you. All right, should we entertain a final motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Patty.
Perfect, we've got to go around. Deb?
Yes.
Okay, Julie Barbaghina? Yes. Bill Greeley?
Yes.
John Hall?
Yes.
Amanda Rowe?
Yes.
Cheryl Doyle?
Yes.
Patty Griffin-Starr?
Yes.
Joe Sheehan?
Yes.
And Catherine? Aye. Great, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for hanging in.